Good morning. I am Rodney Feliciano, PhD student from ONIRIS in Nantes, France. I will be presenting to you points from our research entitled Towards a Climate Change Resilient Industry, Application to Dairy Manufacturing. This presentation is part of the PROTECT project. As we know, climate change is a major issue that encompasses different parts of our lives. Presented here is an example of these projections in Europe as done by the Peseto project. This shows the effect projected increase in temperature with changes in scenarios of successful or unsuccessful mitigation. Successful and unsuccessful mitigation. As shown in these pictures, there will be those who will experience benefit in climate changes due to lower increase in temperature, while there are those who will experience higher temperature increases. Given the previous projections, the impact of climate change in agriculture is inevitable. In line with this, reports on the current impact of climate change have already been noted, and these include the reduction in the production of food crops, seafood, and meat, influence on the microbial load by climate events, and also in the dairy industry through the reported reduction in milk yield due to changes in weather. With this, the impact of climate change also have an implication. These are presented, namely, perhaps there will be need for a review of existing processing steps and adaptation as necessary, and perhaps a need for new food supply sources and raw materials, given the possible disruptions caused by climate change. For our part in the project, our ultimate goal is to reduce the impact of climate change in the dairy supply chain. However, this supply chain is complex and multifaceted. As such, a general scope of the dairy supply chain was considered, encompassing a four common stage approach. Presented here are the four common stages in the dairy supply chain considered. The general aim of this study is to review the microbial food safety of the dairy supply chain in relation to the effects of climate change. Evidences of the effects of climate change on the microbial food safety were, presented. Mitigation points that will limit this were also presented. Presented here is an overview of the list of manufacturing steps of different dairy products, all of which come from a single raw material, that is raw milk. A question to ask is, where are the possible effects of climate change in the production of raw milk? Presented here is a scheme on the possible effects in raw milk production and relating these together. These are based on papers showing that climate conditions during seasons affect microbial ecology of raw milk. Also, papers have reported that climate conditions influence the health status of cow, such as the induction of heat stress during extreme weather conditions or hot weather conditions. The papers on the microbial ecology of milk by climate conditions reported that during summer milk were found to be most ecologically diverse among other seasons, while winter was the least diverse. For the other studies, similarities were observed in other seasons such as spring and autumn, winter and spring. On the other hand, the impact of heat stress in cow is through increase in occurrence of mastitis and reduction in milk yield, ultimately impacting the quantity and the quality of raw milk produced. Also, heat-stressed cows have an increased vulnerability to microbial infection. The question now is on the magnitude and on how will this turn in the future will be dependent on how will climate change unfold. As such, these changes in quality might not only lead in problems but also opportunities for newer farmlands and innovation in process. The effects on raw milk will have therefore an impact to current food safety management. A brief overview of food safety management was presented in the following figure taken from Membré 2014. This food safety pyramid shows the different food safety programs implemented in a food manufacturing facility and risk assessment being done by government and until recently also by food manufacturers themselves in the form of QMRA. Along with these effects of climate change and raw milk is the question on how can we contextualize this along food safety. Presented here are the effects of climate change, contextualized towards the different food safety programs and risk assessment being done. New factors influencing microbial growth might be relevant to risk assessment, while changes in microbial ecology, new in the form of new microbial hazards and higher raw milk contamination will be relevant to HACCP, while reductions in raw milk production or feed sources might need newer sources and as such will be relevant or might be relevant to existing prerequisite programs. Also, to factories located in vulnerable areas, they might need to revisit their prerequisite programs. An example of changes or mitigation points for risk assessment are presented in our right. First, an approach of this kind will be through the need to integrate climate variables in QMRA. This has been done in three ways. First, through direct incorporation. Second, dimension reduction. Third, Bayesian analysis. Aside from QMRA changes, new predictive models taking into account climate variables might be needed in the future. For food safety management, review of HACCP in terms of effectivity of current practices and schedules might be needed. Depending on the observed impact on the quality of food, these can also be similar with prerequisite programs, where supplier specifications might be reviewed depending on the observed changes in milk quality or the current good manufacturing practices. Presented here in the slide is, is the contextualization of these possible effects, mitigation points in the dairy supply chain. Risk assessment and review of its parts may be from raw milk production until the final dairy product. Review of food safety programs will be along its scope, which may be from from the reception of raw milk until to the production of the final packaged product. While for the different prerequisite programs, which are located across the supply chain, review of some of these is also possible, depending on their vulnerability with climate change. We presented the possible effects in raw milk and a scheme trying to tie these together. Mitigation points in food safety programs and risk assessment were presented. It is hoped that some of the points presented will help the dairy industry in the future and for coming effects of climate change. Thank you.